Good evening and thank you for joining us. Thunder Bay City Council now has the results of its indoor arena stakeholder consultation in hand.
The question of a potential 19% increase in user fees has been put to rest for this winter season, but the big hike is still on the table for next year. Lee Noonan was at last night's council meeting and joins us live in the studio. Lee.
Thanks, Ryan. Council now has some data on how user groups are feeling about the question of arena closures versus user fee increases, but the book is closed on that for now. They'll be taking another look at the rates and making their decisions during the 2024 budget deliberations. The city's ice time rates came into effect on April 1st, and any changes to the rates won't be implemented until next April. Closing the Nebing Arena could have saved the city about $180,000 a year, and user fees would need to increase by 19% to offset that cost. The city's consultation shows that stakeholders do not support an arena closure, but over half of the organizations surveyed said they'd be willing to pay up to 20% more for ice time, and roughly a quarter said they'd be willing to pay more as long as the fees increased gradually over 3 years.
Any larger increases to user fees would be phased over multiple years to address the impact to user groups.
Only 6% of organizations and 13% of individuals surveyed said they aren't willing to pay higher fees at all. However, 25% of organizations said they would book less ice time, which could negatively impact city coffers and could disproportionately affect smaller user groups, including women's and girls' sports. At $149 to $187 an hour, City of Thunder Bay rates were lower than rates in any other large or medium-sized city they looked at, with rates in Northern Ontario ranging between $98 to $125 an hour in Kenora at the low end, up to $235 to $360 an hour in Sudbury.
If we can start shifting more to a user pay system and alleviate some of that pressure off the property taxpayer, I think that, if we can find that happy medium and that consensus, it's for the betterment of everyone.
The city's outdoor rinks, however, are still on the chopping block, with council yet to decide on a proposal that would close 31 out of 39 outdoor rinks this winter. Oliver says council will need to take a practical look at how youth are actually using the rinks.
I do have a 13-year-old son who I take to the outdoor rinks every day, whether it's -40 or +10, he's happy to go. And I drive him. He doesn't want to go to the rink that's just around the corner from our house because he'd rather go to the rink where all his friends are meeting.
Oliver says she doesn't anticipate seeing all 31 rinks closed. The public consultations on outdoor rink closures ended August 27th, and that report will be coming to council on September 11th. Lee Noonan, TBT News.
Residents of a south side street have been kicking up dirt over the city's efforts to naturalize the median across from their homes. Council discussed the issue at last night's meeting and are moving ahead with a plan they hope will address the biggest concerns. The islands along Leland Avenue between Arthur and Walsh Streets were seeded with different mixes of wildflowers and native plants in an effort to find the best ways to naturalize larger areas of turf. The city hopes to encourage urban biodiversity and reduce maintenance. And there are plans to implement the new strategy on new public works projects across the city. But some residents of Leland Avenue are unimpressed with the results.
So I know this was an experiment, believe me, I understand that. But it was an experiment that went terribly wrong. Let's put it that way. Now, I know and I'm not really concerned about whose idea this was, but we got to think of something else.
Road says the height of the plants impairs road visibility and could attract rodents or ticks. Council also received written deputations in support of the naturalization project. They voted to go ahead with a plan to pull up some of the tallest plants and mow the edges of the islands to improve visibility. Administration stresses that the naturalization process is a slow one, and it will be several years before the final results of the seeding will be seen.
A sentencing hearing was held in Fort Frances yesterday for a former nurse at the local hospital who pleaded guilty to criminal negligence causing death in the case of an elderly woman who died in 2015. 76-year-old Hermina Fletcher is believed to have died from morphine toxicity after her medication record was altered by a nurse who stole the extra amount to feed her own addiction. The nurse then failed to switch the dosage amount back for the next nurse on shift, and Fletcher died one day after receiving a harmful dose. 38-year-old Lindsay Coyle was originally charged in 2019 with second-degree murder, but pleaded guilty to the negligence charge last year. In court yesterday, Fletcher's family demanded that Coyle receive jail time. The Crown is asking for a 2-year prison sentence, while Coyle's lawyer is asking for a 3-year suspended sentence. The judge is expected to make a decision in October or November.
Thunder Bay police have laid additional child pornography charges against a local man who was first arrested back in May. 35-year-old William Joseph Daniel Hubbard faces several new charges, including luring a person under the age of 16, making child pornography, and voyeurism. These are in addition to the initial charges against him of possessing, distributing, and accessing child pornography. Hubbard appeared in court today and remains in custody.
A local death has been connected to the investigation of a Mississauga man accused of helping people kill themselves by selling lethal substances online.
More than 40 countries and a growing number of Canadian police forces are now involved in the investigation of Kenneth Law. And today, new charges were laid against him. Heather Wright has more.
I'm Ken, Seen here in a video taken at the Royal York Hotel in Toronto is Kenneth Law. The former chef now accused of selling sodium nitrite to vulnerable people, many of whom took their own lives. Today, Peel Police announced new charges against the 57-year-old.
The police have laid an additional 12 charges of counseling or aiding suicide.
In total, Law faces 14 charges, all related to deaths here in Ontario.
The victims were Ontario residents. They were both male and female, between the ages of 16 and 36 years of age.
Kenneth Law was first arrested back in May, accused of shipping lethal amounts of sodium nitrite to people around the world. This substance is typically used to cure meat, but can be deadly in high amounts. More than 40 countries and 11 police forces in Ontario are now involved in this investigation.
We believe over 1,200 packages may have been sent out. They were sent to over 40 countries globally.
In the United Kingdom, authorities have identified at least 272 people as having purchased products from websites once run by Kenneth Law. 88 of them have died, including Tom Parfit, who took his own life when he was just 22 years old.
Every individual death is a tragedy, and the numbers we're seeing here just defy belief.
Tom's father, David, says he is grateful to authorities in both Canada and the UK for investigating these deaths, but wants more done when it comes to online forums that counsel people on how to kill themselves.
I still don't understand why we allow people access to a forum that encourages vulnerable people like my son to understand how to kill themselves and then provides the methods to do so.
Police will not say how many deaths they believe could be linked to Kenneth Law, but based on an analysis by CTV News, that number could be more than 100. Kenneth Law remains in custody. Heather Wright, CTV News, Toronto.
The union that represents Ontario elementary school teachers says it's applying for conciliation.
It's an effort to reach what it calls a fair agreement with the province. Siobhan Morris reports.
Patience is wearing thin for the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario.
After a full year of bargaining without sufficient progress, ETFA is proceeding with an application for conciliation.
A referee to help the union and government find common ground at the bargaining table. An early benchmark for potential job action or strike down the road.
I think it's disappointing that families have to have this anxiety when we just proved that there's a credible framework that works for the union, for the employer, the school board, and for the government.
A framework public high school teachers have agreed to. Bargain until October 27th. If they can't negotiate a new contract, go to binding arbitration.
Once again, this government is trying to be a bully, and they're trying to impose someone else's agreement, someone else's terms and conditions on our members.
The ETFO president says their members have unique concerns around issues like class size and violence.
Over 34% of our members said they've engaged in an evacuation of their classroom because of the violence. That is not going to be resolved through an arbitration process.
The education minister doesn't buy it.
It is the exact same remedy, the approach we take for outstanding issues with nurses, with doctors, with public high school teachers, but apparently not for public elementary teachers.
Parents of young students aren't panicking about what might be ahead.
I'm content to let it play out. I'm on the side of the teachers. Really, they want what's best for the kids.
They're teaching our kids. We need to make sure that they're well taken care of and adequately compensated.
We support the teachers and the efforts that they've made over the past couple of years, but it's also summer, so we're taking it one day at a time.
EDFO members start voting on whether or not to support a strike in mid-September.
That was CTV's Siobhan Morris reporting. Kenora OPP are reporting a serious collision just before midnight last night that sent 3 people to hospital. It happened on Highway 17 near the Whitehead Road turnoff. OPP say it was a head-on collision involving 2 vehicles. EMS and Kenora fire crews were also called in, and the 3 occupants were taken to Lake of the Woods Hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. A 61-year-old driver has been charged with careless driving. The highway was shut down for a short time while the vehicles were removed.
The annual general meeting for Choose Life is being held at the Nor'Wester Hotel this week.
The organization was developed by Anishinaabe Aski Nation, to ensure access to program funding for First Nations youth at risk of suicide. Carl Langdon reports.
Choose Life's annual general meeting is described as a transformative gathering focused on mental health advocacy, workshops, and providing youth with access to land-based programming. The organization works to facilitate access to funds in communities struggling with high incidences of youth suicide. NAN's Deputy Grand Chief, Bobby Narcisse, spoke to us about the importance of the program.
Choose Life was born out of the necessity that we need to have community-based solutions to many of the community-based challenges that we have, especially within suicide, and we want to take a more proactive approach in life promotion to really engage our young people in worthwhile land-based educational activities that really focused on their mental health.
Narcisse also emphasized the benefits of focusing on the community's youth.
At the end of the day, the Choose Life initiatives and programs is for the youth. It's for the youth, and it's also great to engage them and also get their perspective as well, because they're the ones that are up and coming and living in the communities as well and are facing many of these challenges.
Staff from Indigenous Services Canada were also there to help guide Choose Life through the processes of applying for core funding and subsequent reporting requirements. Carl Langdon, TBT News.
Well, turning